If you haven't seen one of these before, this is a face-turning octahedron, or FTO for short. It's a non-WCA puzzle that's nonetheless garnered a bit of a speed-solving community over the last few years, due to its super fun and unique solving style. To me, it feels a bit like a mutant 4x4 Yao solve, with some small elements from 3x3 and Pyraminx too. However, despite how cool the puzzle is, the FTO community has always been held back by the hardware. For the longest time, the only available option was the Lanlan, which is a super old puzzle that really isn't designed for speed solving at all. After a lot of modding, it was usable, but still pretty bad. Then, in mid-2021, Qi released their version of a rexCube, which is actually just a shape mod of the FTO. So with 3D printed parts and a bit more time modding, people started turning that puzzle into an FTO, dubbing it the rexTO. This was a step up, but still not great. And crucially, it was still time consuming and now pretty expensive too. However, fast forward a few years, and DianSheng's just released this, a stickerless, speed-solvable, factory magnetized FTO. No modding required. So the question becomes, what's it like? Well, my first few solves out of the box were pretty awful, as you could see there. To be fair, this was mostly just due to the unfamiliar colour scheme and my own lack of practice in general. However, the puzzle itself needed some work too, since it's quite tight out of the box with pretty bad corner cutting. I swapped the colour scheme round to more closely resemble the one I'm familiar with, and loosened it by maybe an eighth or a quarter of a turn. There's a fairly small range of usable tensions, so you want to be pretty careful when adjusting it. With the tensions I have it at right now, there's around half a piece of forward corner cutting, and essentially no reverse corner cutting to speak of. Although that part's pretty standard for FTO, to be honest. It's also quite a bit smaller and lighter than the Lanlan or rexTO, which took a bit to get used to, but I actually quite like now. It's about 87 grams, which is similar to some heavier 3x3s like the YS3M or WRM 2019. After adjusting it, I did a few hundred solves, and my overall impression is that thankfully this is a big step up from the Lanlan or rexTO. It's not perfect by any means, but having an affordable, readily available FTO that's actually good is massive for the FTO community. It's much smoother than the rexTO, with a fast, light turning feel and medium strength magnets. I personally added a bit of Dignitas to set it up, but honestly this wasn't super necessary. Out of the box it's already pretty good, and I think other lube setups would be more about personal preference than because there's anything actually wrong with the way it comes. I find the feeling very satisfying now, and since getting this puzzle I've beaten all my PB averages. I know some people still prefer the rexTO, but at least compared to the ones I've tried, I personally didn't feel like there's much of a contest. I definitely prefer the smoother, faster feeling of the DianSheng, and for the most part it just feels a lot more reliable to me. It's hard to describe, but the rexTO always felt like what it was, essentially a homemade puzzle, and I never felt like I could just turn normally on it. The DianSheng on the other hand feels like a real speed cube. Admittedly, not one that's quite up to the standards of most WCA puzzles, but I don't feel like I really have to adjust my turning to solve on it. It still doesn't flow as well as I'd like, which I guess is related to the biggest problem with this cube, the popping. I would like to be able to loosen this even more than I have to make it flow better, but even at the tensions I have it at now, popping is an issue. This can be partial pops, where a triangle gets displaced but doesn't actually fall out of the puzzle, which would be familiar to anyone who's solved on the rexTO before. But I also get full pops, where a piece does leave the puzzle, and unfortunately often explosions, where a whole lot of pieces fly out. To be clear, these still aren't that common. It's probably something like 1 in 100 solves for me right now, but it's frustrating that this happens at all, while I'm still at a tension where really I want to loosen it more. This may be fixable by just adjusting your turning to suit, because at least for me, it's quite predictable when this happens. Specifically, it's when I'm trying to do a U move using a bit too much corner cutting. So like here is fine, but back here and it'll just explode. Also, I believe some other testers have been having issues with the core stripping. This hasn't been an issue for me personally, but it's possible that DianSheng's quality control isn't perfect there. Overall though, I think questions of performance are almost a little irrelevant here, to be honest, since none of the issues are a deal breaker. This is easily the best option that's widely available, so if you're interested in FTO, this is the one you should be getting. And I really think you should try it out. FTO is a super cool puzzle that can be kind of mind-bending at first. A lot of people I see try FTO for the first time struggle to even turn it. Once it clicks though, it's a really satisfying solving experience, and I think it'll make for a great addition to the WCA eventually. And DianSheng seems to agree, since they've offered to sponsor competitions that hold FTO as an unofficial event. From what I've heard from other people who have worked with DianSheng as a sponsor, they're quite generous and easy to work with, so this could be a great opportunity. They've also made this puzzle very affordable. It's listed for just $18 on both the CS and the Cubicle, which is somehow only a few dollars more expensive than the Lanlan. So if you're interested in a puzzle with a fun, unique solving experience that's kind of like a strange twist on 4x4, I'd really recommend checking out the DianSheng FTO, and maybe even organising a comp with it as an unofficial event. I'll also have a link in the description to the FTO Discord server, where there's all sorts of resources to learn and get fast rate FTO. Hope you check it out.